Superintendent's proposed budget workshop. If we could all just stand and say the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, thank you. So, as I think everybody knows, at our last Board of Education meeting, Mr. Vidancy put on a presentation regarding his proposed budget. He went over a whole lot of data. And instead of going over the full presentation today, Mr. Vidancy, maybe what you could do is you could hit on the highlights, the major drivers of the budget, so that people that didn't get a chance to see it can hear that. And just to make sure everybody understands that the full presentation is out on our website. The full video is out on our website. Mr. Vidancy also sent a copy of it to the members of the Town Council and the members of the Town Board of Finance. So they have the full presentation as well.
Thank you. You know, in thinking about it, it's one of those things I think you've heard about it in the past. Sometimes it's this old phenomenon. If you ever interview for a job, you sometimes get in your car on the ride home and you always think about all the things you wish you would have said. You know, and I do that often, sometimes, just on my drive home and reflecting on a day. And what I failed to do at the start of my last presentation was thank my entire administrative team and the staff that works to put this budget together. I don't know that folks realize how much time is spent developing a budget. It pretty much starts in October of every year, as we know. It ends in May. And short of June, July, and August, and September, you know, we tee it up again. There's a lot of time spent gathering information, running numbers, having conversations with various administrative members about, you know, certain positions and requests and needs and whatnot. So I truly want to say thank you to my administrative team, you know, from central office leadership all the way down through the building level, and all of the office assistants that help us compile this information as well. I also want to thank my administrative team that's here tonight. Always supportive, which is much appreciated. I tell them it's very reassuring to see them. You know, in the audience, because at the end of the day, that's who we're here to support. So with that said, I just want to touch upon some of the major drivers of our budget. I won't go through some of the introductory slides out of respect for everyone's time. This is a number I touched upon, and I always joke that people don't like this number because they don't necessarily know how it's arrived at, but I continue to say, okay, but it's arrived at the same way for every district. And so it is the common formula that's used to determine per pupil expenditures. Is there any chance I can ask someone to hit the lights? Just because it is a lot easier to see once we get maybe for me especially, once we get the resolution. So that's just some context on, you know, the state of budgeting relative to surrounding communities. I think budget history is always important. You know, we did have a couple years where there were minimal increases, and as you all know, that compounds year over year as you try to advance. So I will say I feel like we've done a nice job in the past couple of years trying to incrementally increase back to the levels that we need in order to sustain level services. And even in some cases, we've been able to add strategically staff members where needed. So I appreciate the support of the town that we've gotten thus far. This slide to me, I think, is always an important slide because I think it tells the story of some of the difficult decisions that needed to be made from the outset of the process in terms of when we started out with all of the requests as they were synthesized, you know, across multiple meetings with myself and Mrs. Mellett, Mr. Pepe, and trying to make decisions to arrive at a number that we, you know, think we can survive with and provide the level of services to our students that they deserve, and supports for our staff, but at the same time, you know, being cognizant of the fiscal reality right now in the economy. As you can see, one other area, which I think is something that we've been innovative with, and we've done this now year over year with our budget, when we can remove any one-time costs associated with the budget so that they don't become annual expenses, if you will, in terms of the money that's been allocated to the budget by the town. So we are very intentional about never wasting a dollar. And so when we are able to have non-lapsing account funds available to us, when the time arises and there's a need, we're able to do that without requesting any additional funding from the town. And I think that shows that we're fiscally responsible based on the fact that we were able to remove all major projects and equipment and special projects because of stewarding the money properly and using non-lapsing funds strategically. I talk to this slide often. If you went to any superintendent's budget presentation across the state of Connecticut, you would see essentially the same. Salaries and benefits are the major drivers of essentially any school district's budget. And a lot of that has to do with the old analogy that my mentor, Mrs. Smith, provided. We're in the human services industry, so it takes humans to provide the service. And so this is one of the areas that, it's not so much our purchase services or contracted services. A lot of it has to do with salaries and benefits. Are there purchase services that are major drivers of some of the increases? Yes, and we've spoken to those over and over. The rubbish removal, electricity costs, transportation costs, again, not unique to Southington. Salaries for existing personnel. I think you're going to see a little bit more work done on that tonight in terms of what do our salaries, what are they comprised of, and how do we fare compared to towns in Harford County and also in our DIRG. The one thing I will say, regardless of how we fare, I think that we engage in good faith bargaining with all of our bargaining units, and whatever our staff gets, they deserve. And so for me, in order to remain competitive and recruit the best teachers and keep our talented teachers, it's important that we pay accordingly. And so if you see a higher number than you'd like in terms of what it costs to drive the salaries, you get what you pay for. There's a lot of districts sometimes that if they're not able to support and cost of living is exceeding what teachers are making, you're going to start to see movement within your district, and that's never a good thing. New personnel, I touched upon this at the presentation last week. We did have in all 43 positions were requested in the budget, and as you can see, we're asking for a total of 4.3. Every administrator that we met with made a very rational argument for why they were requesting what they were requesting and justifying the need. But at the end of the day, when we started with all of those requests compiled, we were at 9.51%, and that's just not a reality that we can bring forward. Health insurance, we continue to see this in meeting with my Hartford's area superintendents group today. Actually, this was a big talking point. Health insurance is a major driver. One district mentioned that it's a 24% increase for them this year. Others were anywhere between 11 and 16% increases. Health insurance is a real cost factor right now in school system budgets. Transportation, that was another driver. And I did ask the question today of, so here I am in a room with all of the Hartford area superintendents. Has anybody done anything innovative with transportation to help it reduce some of the increase or the cost of transportation as a whole? And I even brought up the idea of opting in. Everybody has tried in various ways, shapes, and forms. It continues to be a challenge for districts. Nobody gave me an answer that said, "Oh, that's a great idea. I'd love to, explore if we could pull that off in Southington." One district did reference the fact that they actually brought in a company who was trying to utilize AI to consolidate routes and look at, buses and like geo-mapping in terms of where our students live. But the software is in such a primitive stage that it wasn't fully developed to a point that they felt comfortable making those changes. What I saw at best was, in really doing the eyeball test and going over transportation routes with a fine-tooth comb, some districts were able to remove a bus here or there, but it wasn't anything that I would say would be significant. And incidentally, as part of our reallocation last year, we reduced by a couple buses and consolidated routes. So we've kind of already been there, done that. So not sure that that's an option on the table for us, but I do know it's an area that all districts need to find efficiencies in at some point. Our special education outplaced tuition and diagnostic center tuition, this is a number actually, and you're going to see some slides tonight, that as much as that seems like a large number, we're actually doing a tremendous job with the percentage of our budget that we spend on outplaced tuition against the overall budget when you compare us to other districts. And that's not a knock on other districts. I actually think it's a testament to this board and in this town of where we have had to add staff. It has led to some cost avoidance. So you're going to see some in-depth presentation on that this evening. And that is an area that I think at the legislative level, I'm going to continue to advocate for, that if we have in-district programs, they reduce the threshold that's needed to realize some reimbursement from the state versus putting all of those added staff members, on the backs of the local taxpayers. With that said, I get asked every year, what is your total number of FTEs? And if we're just using that number to determine our efficiency, then I think we're looking at it completely wrong. Because I could back out 10 of those staff members that we've added for these continuum of services, and then this slide would look entirely different. And so would the increase that we'd be facing due to outplaced tuitions. And so FTEs themselves don't tell a story. And I have to reinforce that in tonight's workshop, because I just think it's a misnomer. And it's something that people have to be, cognizant of. Technology, this is, again, not new for any district. I don't know of a district that's not one-to-one at this point. Pretty much COVID flipped that script, and most districts are one-to-one. Some approach it a little differently, across the levels in terms of K2, 3, 5, middle school, and high school. But this is an investment that this board made dating back to when we went to one-to-one. Interestingly enough, some of you may not remember this, but I was at central office at the time that we were actually figuring out how we could get to one-to-one. And we talked about it often, and it was just too big of a number. We thought we'd never be able to pull off. So the seed money that we got from the federal funding to get us there is really what made it possible. But then once you start with that route, there has to be some commitment to maintaining a replacement cycle, because we want our students, if we expect them to use the technology, to have the appropriate technology. The replacement cycle, again, we'll speak to this a little bit more in depth tonight, but those are areas that Tyler Savage and Rebecca Salvacal and Jessica Poon have worked hard to create a budget that is realistic and tries to be cognizant of the curve, if you will, in terms of no specific year having a giant number associated with it in terms of cost for the replacement cycle, trying to keep it at a balanced number so that it doesn't come across as a large contributor to any increases that are requested year over year. Federal funding, again, not unique to Southington, but our demographics have changed. So some of the formula that's used to determine the level of federal funding you get has to do with community wealth. We'll again hear a little bit more about that this evening, but based on the most recent census data and some of the other data that they use to determine this, your poverty rates, free reduced lunch rates and whatnot, we continue to qualify for less federal funding than we used to. And so that's an area that, even if you look at that over a 5-year period, that's about a $300,000 reduction. It's not an addition, but yet our costs have never gone down. One-time funding, again, those are things that we can work with through the Board of Finance in town. We've done that in the past. And then the budget dates for everyone, just to be cognizant of. Obviously, we're here tonight. We always use the second workshop as a kind of a to-be-determined date. Depends how far we get along with things tonight. So hopefully we're able to provide you the answers or whatever information you need this evening. I do want to thank the board. Clearly, you all were pretty busy, because when I got into work on Monday morning and then again this morning, there were 40 questions teed up for us. And I have to thank our central office staff that worked, right through up to this meeting. I think Mrs. Mellett walked in right now because we literally just finalized one slide so that you could have all the information tonight if needed. So that we worked right up to the time of the meeting to provide you the information that you seek. So we're prepared to answer questions. The format I plan on using tonight is projecting the Q&A grid so that the public can see what questions you all asked. And then at the same time, whenever we have information other than that just an answer, I've asked members of my administrative team that represent the various departments related to that question to come up and speak to some visuals that they've created to provide you a little bit more of an in-depth answer and some context. And the nice part about that as well is we can also post all of this, both the Q&A doc and the slides for you and for the public, so that folks who are not here this evening can go back and kind of review what was prepared and shared with all of you. So with that said, I'll just make a quick adjustment here, and then we'll make a shift. So bear with me for one moment.
Can you ask questions of what he just did?
So before you start, I just want to say, so I think everybody knows we did things a little bit differently, where we got the budget on Thursday, we got the budget on Thursday evening. And as Steve said, the board took this very seriously and spent the last 5 days going through the budget, coming up with questions and putting them in the grid. 40 questions is a lot of questions. And I think when you read through some of these, there's some pretty meaty questions in here that will help drive more discussion this evening. So we're not just going to be looking at these. These questions may be triggering more questions. So there will be dialogue and discussion tonight. But I also want to echo what you said. I mean, between you, because you always forget to say the work you've done, but you and your staff to spend a day and a half, basically, maybe a little bit longer, because you probably were anticipating some of these questions coming along, but being able to answer all 40 of them for us tonight, I think helps us in making sure that we can make the right decisions going forward. And to your point, some of these, we may not get to all of them tonight, and there may be other questions that come up tonight, and that's the purpose of Thursday's meeting, so.
Sure.
With
Thank you.
that, Mr. Brown?
Yeah, can I ask a couple questions about what the superintendent just said?
Sure.
That aren't on the grid? Yeah, the last thing you talked about, the federal money going down, is that because the federal formula changed, or have we magically reduced poverty in Southington?
So good question. I'll let Mrs. Mallett speak to that.
I think it's the opposite. Yes, we did fall below the poverty line, and that triggers the loss of 2 parts of the Title I funding. There is, I think, a total of 4. Don't quote me on that, but I can get the information. But because our poverty went down, that was the indication. And we were facing that last year. You'll remember last year was the first time that we did not budget any use of Title I funds. And we brought the literacy and math specialists into the operating budget because of comments that were made at the state level. They wanted us to make sure that we had the staff that we needed in our operating budget. So that was the reason of that.
Okay. I do have a second question. On the buses, can we still look into that, saving money? Because, and again,
So I'm going to let Mr. Romano come up and speak to that, because he and I have discussed this at length, and he has a very good explanation and a consideration that you probably want to consider. And his answer is in the doc, but it's easier for him to speak to versus reading it.
Good evening, everyone. So transportation, every year we look at it, we try to reduce buses. We've gotten to the point that it's going to be tough to reduce another bus, but every year we do look at it. We will continue to look at routes. I know nobody's happy with seeing a lot of the buses half full. The problem we really have is Southington has 200 miles of road. Students are only allowed to be on the bus for 35 minutes. So it's actually 45 minutes, but they can't be on the bus 45 minutes before the start of school. Obviously, we need them in the school, 10 minutes before school starts so they can get in, get themselves acclimated. So that leaves us 35 minutes for busing. We're currently running on the high school, which really dictates a lot of what we do. Our route times are about 30 minutes, so on average. Some of them are actually higher. We're not getting the students there until 5 minutes before the start of school. So, we do continue to look at it. We look for improvements. When you think about how far buses have to go for the high school, which really is the major driver for us, you got to get from Lake Compounds to the high school within 35 minutes. You got to get from the Wolcott part of town, 35 minutes. You got to get from Meriden to the high school in 35 minutes. That's a hard task to do. You can't continue to keep picking up students along the way or you won't get there in time. So that's a big driver. We always want to make better, right? So if we can't reduce the buses, maybe we can make them more full. Maybe we can look at on the high school, instead of a student walking 2 miles to school, maybe we reduce that to 1.5 miles. So we can get more kids on the bus and maybe have some parents that would be driving say, hey, if I can get my kid to school On the bus, maybe I won't drive, which will free up some of the traffic congestion we have. We're going to look at that on both the high school and the middle school. We know on the elementary school, if we tried reducing the distance for students that do walk, it's going to require us to add a bus, because there's some areas in neighborhood schools where you can get into the school from the back they have walk paths from outside the back neighborhoods. And those areas, we don't have any buses in there, so we would have to add buses to get into those areas. So, again, if we can't do better on reducing buses, maybe we can improve service. Questions?
No, I just want to say that's very helpful, thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah.
Oh, Mr. Carson?
Yeah. Thanks, Mr. Romano. All good information. How do you think providing an opt-out to families or parents? We've had some discussions amongst board members and the community. When I say that, or when I offer that as a possibility, what immediately goes through your head?
So, we actually did do an opt-out 2 years ago. We sent a form home in the summer. It went to all families. We probably got about 5% that were willing to opt out. The big problem there, if you put yourself in the parents' shoes, their fear is if they opt out, and we purposely put in there, said, if you want to opt back in, you just have to let us know. And I can't remember how much time we told them we would have to know. But they're very concerned if they opt out and then something changes in their lifestyles, they change jobs or whatever. Now they say, well, what am I going to do with my child? So they're afraid to opt out. We've tried it. We've done some education to try and help it along. It hasn't been really successful. It's something that parents are afraid to say, oh, I don't want to. Even the parents who were driving their students were afraid to opt out in case they couldn't drive their students anymore.
Okay, I think, I appreciate you exploring it and voicing your concern. I think we have some solutions, for those families and parents, and also to identify your concerns, right? In electing to opt out, in the form of incentivizing, right? These families, parents, students, to opt out. And then, the other thing that, I want people to know and to hear is, on average, right, if we were to eliminate a single bus route from the district, what does that cost us, or what would that save us?
Approximately $80,000 for every bus
Okay.
for the year.
Yeah, because our general transportation budget line is approximately, what, 2.8 million?
Sure, somewhere's in that
Yeah.
range, yep.
So, that's without special education, that's without athletic transportation. So basically eliminating one bus route or one bus would save the district approximately $80,000.
Correct.
Okay, fantastic, thank you.
Any other questions?
I-
Yes,
If I could, Mr. Chair.
Ms. Wyatt?
Thank you, Mr. Romano, very
Sure.
informative. I think just to, again, going off of what Mr. Carson just said, I think there's an opportunity for the buses because, just over time, and I've noticed them from being in the district, there's a lot of soccer moms, soccer dads dropping off the kids every
Yes.
morning and every afternoon. It's complete chaos in a lot of the school, elementary schools, middle schools, the high schools. So clearly, there's a lot of empty buses, and I'm just wondering, do we have the type of information necessary to really try to, because it's going to be a tough issue.
Sure.
But I think that's a real number that you just conveyed to Mr. Carson for $80,000. And if, the buses are running and they're getting there, there's, 5 kids, children on the bus, I think that's an issue. So, is there that type of data out that we can look at relative to how many children are taking the bus, how many, parents are bringing kids to school? Because right now, I would probably be inclined to say that there's more children that get dropped off by parents than take the bus.
I would agree with you. Unfortunately, we do still have to offer the transportation to all of them. Again, the opt-out program, we will continue to work with that. It hasn't really produced, we were really excited when Mr. Medancy allowed us to do it, and it didn't produce what we were hoping, and we do continue to talk to families that do call in, talking with us about transportation. We do pick their brain to try and find ways to do better with it. Again, our biggest problem now is the amount of time that students do have to spend on the bus. We really can't increase the routes much more. We also have to pay for the transportation, EC Goodwin Tech and Wilcox, and our parochial schools. So all of those, impact us. The EC Goodwin Tech and Wilcox are at the same time as the high school, so we can't eliminate buses when they're going in different areas. So it's quite a complex problem. We have, as Mr. Medancy said, we have reduced buses over the last couple of years. We did take another one away this last year. We're just kind of at the point where we're going to strip the nut. So if we can't reduce buses, then maybe we can improve services. It's the best I can offer you. But I will tell you that we look at it every year. We look at it halfway through the year. We do bus counts to see what we have for transportation. We do it in October, and then we do it again in April in between the sports seasons to see what the real ridership is, because a lot of students that do sports after school wouldn't take that bus, but we try to do it right before the sports season starts, both fall and spring.
Chair, can I ask a follow-up question? Mr. Romano, as it relates to our transportation contract, what's our commitment to the company in terms of number of buses, dollars, years, et cetera?
So it's not we have a 3-year contract with them right now. This is year 1 of a 3-year contract. We determine, I work with them, but we get to tell them how many buses we want. There's no minimum, there's no maximum. The sad truth is we have a hard enough time finding drivers, so it actually benefits us that they can't get drivers because it reduces the number of buses that we would like to actually have. But so it's up to us. We determine what the contract is each year.
Okay, thank you.
So this is a big issue, right?
Sure.
$80,000, $100,000 a bus is a lot of money, right?
Yeah.
So, and maybe this is something, and you have been looking into it, maybe just continue to stay on top of this. Maybe it's not an opt-out, maybe it's an opt-in, right? Instead of opting out of a bus, maybe we opt into the bus, and that could help with the determination of the ridership. Maybe it's partly communication to make sure that people understand if I don't opt in, but I got a problem, what would I do? I call the district, and I can get, my kid is not gonna be kept off the bus.
Sure.
But in order for us to do budgeting and planning and bus riding and routes, we need to know who. Because you're right, it's chaos at schools, right? You go
Yeah.
by, my goodness, you go by DePaulo, you go by any of the elementary schools, it's chaos. But the sad part is when you drive around town in the morning, the buses look pretty empty,
Yeah.
right? So, and the 35 minutes, 45 minutes, that's a big deal, right? As you're saying, from Lake Compounds to Wolcott to Meriden, it's a long ride. But some of those shorter routes in the middle, maybe those are the things we can continue to focus in on, because these are real dollars and could have a real impact on the budget.
Agreed.
Yep, and we talked about, I think later on, one of the discussion items is the cost of gas too, in terms of the budget. Gas has gone down from, in the $3+ to like $2.40, $2.50 a gallon. Are we able to see any of that cost savings?
Yeah, there isn't anything in the contract for a reduction. I do believe that there is on the high end, or was that just the last contract, Ms. Millett? That was just a long contract. Yeah, so there is nothing on the contract for gas savings.
Right, and it would go the opposite way too, so if gas
Yeah.
spiked,
Right.
We would have protection from having to incur additional costs.
Okay. All right, thank you. Very good information. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Just anecdotally, one of the concerns that was discussed today with a district that did try to consolidate buses was they ended up having more miles of road and more kids on the bus, which meant more stops, which meant longer rides and kids arriving late to school, and it's been a little bit of a headache for the district at this point. So I think to Mr. Romano's point, when he uses the analogy, strip the nut, we just got to be careful that we don't create a, solving one problem sometimes creates another. So we just have to be cognizant of that. That would be all I would suggest. All right, so we're moving along here. Comparison of teachers' salaries to others in our DIRG, average salary starting and top. So we have a slide that speaks to that for you this evening. I'm just going to refresh it too to make sure it's updated. I want to make sure, let me go way bigger for you. Unless you guys want to try and.
No, bigger's good.
Slideshow on the right.
All right. Okay. They might even be able to go a little bigger. No, let me go there. Okay, so again, looking at
I'm sorry, before you go see Mr. Medancy, these slides and the associated data, there are going to be links in this thing, the document, the electronic document that we can get to these.
Yes, correct. And so that was a little bit, you have paper copies, but we've hyperlinked things in, so obviously you can't click on a link on a piece of paper. But yeah, all of this will be available to you.
All right, thank you.
And so we can look in terms of starting salaries all the way to ending salaries. I think one of the things we got to be cognizant of is we looked for two different data sets. We looked in our DIRG, but we also looked in Harford County. Now the challenge with the DIRG is that those districts could be anywhere in the state, and one of the, as you know, cost of living, if you're in Eastern Connecticut, is far less than cost of living in Western Connecticut. So depending on where that town, exists and what portion of the state, that could be a little bit subjective. We tend to use for negotiations, and any of you who have been on negotiations with me in the past, Hartford County, and even there we know that there's some pretty wide, discrepancies between ability to pay and community wealth in towns. But as you can see, based on the averages against Southington, we're not out of line, if you will, with that. This is also with the masters, because we typically right now are, a lot of schools, like UConn's a good example, they have the +1 program, so kids are getting out with a master's. So, to budget solely for a bachelor's, you might be looking for students that already have, or graduates that already have. Again, right in line with. We have the 6th year, which in education, anybody who's a teacher knows that the 6th year is really the gold standard. That's where you potentially can realize an increase in your salary, but very much commensurate. I'm not one, and you know this about me, to read off of slides to you. You can see it, so I don't want to, for time's sake, you're looking at the same information. Yeah,
Can you
so
read
this
this
one,
one
I
a
just
little
want you to
bit?
digest this for a minute. So this will be available to you, but what we have here is, all of the Hartford County towns. So that is available to you within the electronic version of your documents. So just want you to know that that's there. And so for now, that's all we got to that question. So let me back out for a second. All right. Yep. Comparison of our ratio of administrators to students compared to others in our DIRG. So an interesting shift that we've had is we used to be in DIRG D. So we were often compared to Wallingford, Milford, Shelton, Branford. The state of Connecticut, and I once asked this question, when are you going to ever update these? Because you haven't ever, and I'm sure communities change over time, because these were all initially designated in 2006. Now just think of Southington alone, how much Southington has changed since 2006 as a community. The answer I was given is we're never going to, because they felt people were using it for the wrong reasons. But the School State Finance Project, which is an organization that I hold in high regard, and their primary mission is to ensure equitable funding for equal outcomes for students. They did take the formulas that were used and then took all of the most recent economic and demographic data that they could to try and redo the formula. So I used, for the sake of your question, I used the most up-to-date DIRG information I have through the School State Finance Project, because I think giving you information from 2006 doesn't really help you. So with that said, we have moved from DIRG D into DIRG C. So all of those districts I just mentioned are no longer, they're now in DIRG D below us. a big driver of what DIRG you land in is your community wealth. So you may hear me say this again over and over, and I apologize for that, but DIRG A districts are pretty much what people refer to as your Gold Coast, your New Canaan, your Darien, your Westport, those districts. DIRG B districts, even if they're in Hartford County, but not solely Hartford County, you might find a Madison, an Avon, a Simsbury, a Glastonbury. We're in DIRG C, which essentially says, we're the third wealthiest DIRG of all the DIRGs. The DIRGs go all the way to DIRG I. And so it just shows you where we stand in terms of ability to pay. So with that said, I have linked in for you the updated DIRGs, just in case you're curious, but we also have the slideshow for you to give you that information. What we have here, and this is a little bit hard to pull, so we tried to represent it a couple different ways. You have building level administrators and you have district administrators, and in every district, your central office leadership structure looks different. I'll give you an example. Wallingford, where I live, had 3 assistant superintendents, okay? But it doesn't necessarily mean they have 3 assistant superintendents if you just compare it to what we have. They call their assistant superintendent for special education. We call it a director of people services. They had an assistant superintendent for personnel and policy. We have a human resources manager. And so it's hard because what the state does when they try to pull this data is they only go off of certified staff. And so you don't really know, depending on what they're calling their executive leadership in their district, what's being reported to the state as a certified administrator. So a little bit hard there. And then within the DIRG, if you can see, and this is the new list of districts in the DIRG, we are, and it kind of stuck out to me like a sore thumb, we're double the next closest district to us in the entire DIRG in terms of population. So, with 6,200 students, the closest I could find was around 3,100 students in Newtown, just in terms of trying to represent. What you have here is, obviously you see the student enrollment. You can see Southington as the driver of the largest district, clearly, with over 6,000 students. At the school level, when we say admin school level, you can see, based on the enrollment, essentially that blue line just shows levels. And then obviously the last one there is the admin to student ratio if you take it holistically. The ratio is, I believe, what the question was asking. So then we have a table, I think, which is a little easier at least to digest in terms of comparative sake. Based off of this information, we have the second highest admin to student ratio in our DIRG. And that was the question, was referencing the DIRG. So there's always a misnomer in every district that you're top heavy. You have too many administrators. That's not unique to any district I've worked in. I've been in 3 different districts. It's often because administrators are usually your highest salaried employees. But just because they are doesn't mean you have too many. Also, just because education budgets are the largest portion of any municipal budget year over year, again, not unique to Southington, they want to say, then what's the biggest driver of that budget? It's the administrators. Okay, so let's go for the administrators. But if you look at the total salary account for administrators, not so. It's actually a very small portion when you don't have a lot of administrators of the overall budget. Question?
Mr. Carson?
Yeah. I just have a question about the DIRG, Steve.
Mm-hmm.
I thought, and maybe this relates to how they calculated it in 2006, but I thought part of the calculation or the profile of similarly situated DIRGs was student enrollment. Is that not true?
Correct, not true. Even when we were in DIRG D, we were compared to, I'm trying to think of some of the districts that were just, Haddam-Killingworth, I think, was one, which is not even close to us enrollment. Bethany was one, again, not even close to us enrollment. Enrollment is, it's I think that's a hard number to drive in terms of the DIRG assignment. Most of it's poverty rate. It's the community wealth. The Anglic is one of the term they use, that kind of stuff.
Because, the reason why I asked, because, when we talk about it as a district, right, both currently and historically, we look to a Glastonbury, we look to a Berlin, we look to a Wallingford, okay?
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Districts that have similar number of schools, similar enrollment, similar community resources. When I'm looking at that list there, I can't even pick one that you know, that I can relate to.
Yeah, I think the two that, to me, that come the closest are North Haven, because that was actually in Dirk D with us at one point in time. They also moved up to Dirk C, so North Haven was one, and Newtown. In terms of size, you know, and both of them have one high school, which is also another
Right.
variable. Wallingford does have two high schools, Milford has two high schools, so it always gets mentioned when we're compared to those towns, well, what are the operating costs when you're running to cost and scale of staff? Per pupil spending for Dirk C. So we're looking at, Mr. Carson, I think this was teed up for you perfectly, right? We did try to provide some comps in terms of historically what we've used, but we also then provided you the DIRG. Again, I'm going to, community wealth, educational attainment too is another one. So the level of education of attained within the community as part of the census data that they use is one of the factors used. We are in DIRG C, you know, fourth from the bottom. Knowing Milford and Wallingford both very well, because those are both the two other districts I worked in, they are different, you know. Per pupil spending, we went over this in the introductory presentation, and then the solar analysis. So I'm going to jump back to the Q&A doc, because there was a question, so what is the savings for solar, or why aren't I seeing it? Mrs. Mellett, I'll let you speak to it.
Sure. The question that is on the grid said, I'm puzzled by what seems to be minimal savings due to solar. Why? And this question, in some form, comes up every year because it's a hard concept for all of us to understand. So I did reach out to Titan, who's our energy consultant, and he put together a graph for us here that you see. And basically what it's saying, it's more about comparing the kilowatt hours generated by our solar and looking at those units and the difference between the rate that we pay on solar and the rate that we pay to Eversource. So he's gone through the 5 locations that we currently have solar on, and the bottom line is he's calculating that we were able to avoid paying the Eversource rate, and we paid the solar rate, and in that transaction, we were able to save about $63,000, which it nets out to at the bottom.
Yes.
That's per year?
That's
Yes.
a 12-month period. Mhm.
63,000.
So follow-up question to that. Tell me how the $850,000 for this consultative contract with the solar provider, like how does that?
Is that the energy performance contract that you're seeing in the budget book? That is not anything to do with this. That is the,
Is it the Noresco Energy Project?
yes, from a long time ago. It's at least 15 or more years ago. And that is a town-wide project where they went around replacing the street lights with LEDs. They did projects inside the schools. And so it was a town-wide project. And there's a payment that's due to, we pay it to the town of Southington. They pay it, I believe, out to Noresco. And we pay based on the square footage of what we were part of the transaction. So we pay a proportionate share of that contract. If you look at the town's budget, they're going to have a similar line item. And again, I don't know if Mr. Romano has more detail about that transaction, but the solar is not the energy performance contract.
Do we have a sunset period on that?
It was a 20-year, wasn't it?
There's still several more years. We could get that information for
It's got to be
you.
at least 15 years that we've been
Correct, yeah.
dealing with that,
Yeah.
with the Noresco.
So one of the things we're doing tonight is any questions that we don't have the answer to for you, we're adding to the grid in real time right now, so we'll add that to you and get you that answer.
And maybe adding with that, because this has been a discussion item year after year after year. It's a huge number, right? And I don't know whether or not we could actually pin anything, the savings that we're getting from that, right? And we're replacing the lights, we're doing LEDs, we're doing whatever within our buildings, right? But we're connected to the town's, it's a town-wide program. So what, is there savings, right? And what portion of that are we seeing, or are we seeing anything? Because we're paying $865,000, and how is that offset?
Yeah.
What are we getting for that? I think that's a really important question, because I don't think we've ever gotten that answer.
If I could, though, what it was, in the words of Sherry Danello, our former business manager, it was cost avoidance. It was never about savings. It was always about the cost avoidance, which is why you change out the light bulbs.
Right.
If you remember back when they changed the bulbs in the auditorium.
Yep.
And everything was being changed over, and it was cost avoidance for us. In the future, it wasn't, but the payment was still due to
A lot of
Nebraska,
stuff,
which we,
right?
yeah, and we
A
did
lot of stuff is
negotiate.
cost avoidance,
Right.
and we've talked
Yeah.
about that, but
Yeah.
I guess maybe if we could find out, what did we avoid? Right? What, does it bend the curve, and if so, what did we avoid by bending that curve?
Sure. What I can offer is Noresco started back when I first started here in 2014. So it may have been 2013, but so we're really only probably about 12, 13 years in on a 20 years. They do present us with quarterly reports that combine us and the town in an annual report. I'd be glad to get that to Mr. Medancy, and he can forward it to you.
And Mr. Romano, does it break us, the Board of Education, out from the town facilities?
I have to look at the report it definitely does break it out, but I don't think it breaks it out and gives you totals. It tells you on certain pages, what was done for streetlights, what was done for LED savings, what was done for the HVAC improvements they did on the roof of the high school. So we probably can pick through it and get us what the cost avoidance was, or what they're saying the savings is.
Okay, thank you.
Okay?
And I think one of the factors that's hard to get to that number in terms of what is the cost avoidance is when we swapped out the LED lights, or the halogen lights, I should say, or the fluorescent lights to the LED lights, you'd be need to using those today to know how much energy they'd be consuming based on today's energy rates, right? And nobody had that forecast 10 years out to know how much electricity rates
Or
would
the middle
change.
schools, when we added on to the middle schools and what was going to be the quote-unquote avoidance. There's no way of knowing the number when you're doing it 10 years ago. You don't know what the number is today, so it's kind of.
And I don't even think in 2013 anybody considered one-to-one devices, servers, switches, access points, air-conditioned control closets. We're using way more energy too than we were in 2013 when we entered into this. So I think it would be, I'm sure there are smart people out there in terms of your civil engineers who could probably come up with that, but I'm not your guy.
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
This is a question, it's not a question. Can we at some point get some idea of potentially how much we could save by going to more solar? And I don't want anyone to do that now, we have enough to do. But maybe that's a discussion for, 6 months from
Yeah,
now.
sure. We'll put a pin in that.
The reason I bring it up, I have solar in my house. I've not paid a penny in 13 years, and that includes charging an electric car every night. So I know there's savings there, but I'm wondering how much of a percentage of our total energy use is from solar.
Yep. Do you want to just go along with the grid then, so that I can stay on the slides, and we'll either answer the question or we'll call someone up to speak to one of the slides?
Sure. The next one is related to technology. It says, can we get more details related to the extreme license in account number 32323? And I don't know, Tyler, if you wanted to come and speak to that. We don't have a slide on that, but.
So essentially, the extreme licensing is so our access points and our switches can be utilized throughout the day. We have about 512 access points, and we have about 80 switches. We were able to, with the way the licensing fell, because they're purchased on like a, not all at once. So the way the licensing fell last year, we were able to remove that from the budget. But the The caveat was it would have to be added back in this year. So that's the reason why it was being added back in, because it was removed during reallocation last year. And those are just the right to use the access points and the switches, so all of our networking and all the internet and everything works from building to building. Any questions otherwise, or?
Just one
Yeah.
question. So in terms of the licensing, and I know the answer to this probably already, but we're not privy to any of those state funds, E-rate or otherwise, for any of that stuff.
So that is all E-rated. So we're going through the process right now for E-rating. But yeah, so the switches, access points, battery backups, they all are E-rate eligible.
Very good.
And yeah, we apply every year. Thanks. Anything else?
Thank you.
Okay, thanks.
Mrs. Carmer, you don't have any questions about the switches or the access points? Okay, because you already know it all. So she often loves to talk about her knowledge of technology. Do we combine efforts with the town during the bidding processes for items such as refuse, plowing, mowing, and other expenses that have potential to be shared? And I think this is a kind of a couple questions were similar in nature to this, so I would ask Mr. Romano to speak to some of it and Mrs. Mellett to speak to some of it.
Sure. Our response to the question in the grid is that services like plowing and mowing need to meet very specific timing requirements. So the Board of Ed pays particular attention to the vendors awarded for these contracts to make sure we can meet the timing required to open schools on time for like the plowing. And during the most recent bid for the trash removal, the board had offered in the bid to allow the town to piggyback on our rates when we were able to send the bid out and award it, but the town decided to bid their services separately from the Board of Ed in that case. So, and then I don't know if you want to speak to the timing of opening schools. and
Sure.
such.
So the issue with plowing and having the town plowing our schools is, it's one of manpower. As Mr. Bedancy can tell you, we're up at 4 o'clock in the morning working on these things. The town is out usually even before that, getting the roads ready. So let's just say that they're starting at 3 o'clock. And if they're gonna start doing the schools, now they gotta start at maybe 1 o'clock at night. And depending on when the snow is hitting, they probably won't be able to get the town and the schools ready on time unless they hire additional staff. Now, when you hire additional staff, that means you gotta have more equipment, it means you gotta have insurances, you have benefits. And, you know, our subcontractors are probably considerably less expensive than the town hiring additional staff. So that's the short answer on it.
The town does a lot of subcontracting too, right? For the town roads?
Yes, they do.
Yeah, okay.
Yes, they do. And they also do the sidewalks. They have contractors that handle the town sidewalks, so.
Ms. Camuso?
Sure.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Rana, so what about mowing, like, or Mrs. Mallett? I understand
Yeah.
the situation with the snow, but
So it's almost the same thing, believe it or not. The town has staff that handles all of the parks and recs, so they're doing all of those. They would have to add additional staff in order to do that. And it would be more than a couple of people that you would have to have if you think about it, because you know how in the spring you end up mowing your yard twice a week instead of once a week? We've got 12 schools that we're dealing with, right? And some of the schools are getting mowed, you know, more than once a week, depending on the time of year. So if you think we got 12 schools and you got 5 days in the week, that means you got to get, you know, 3 schools a day. And the high school's going to take you maybe 2 days. And then if you have rain, what do? So now our vendors come out and they'll do it on the weekends for us, or they'll do it at night. So you're not going to get that from the town without paying a premium overtime. So I like the concept, but it would really be the town that would have to determine that they'd be willing to take that on.
sorry, one more follow-up
Sure.
question. So do we have an analysis of if we added an FTE or 2 FTEs to do that compared to what the contract is? I'm not familiar with the mowing.
Well, I think we did that a couple years ago, and we looked, because we'd have to get a lot of equipment as well. We'd have to get a trailer to move the mower between the sites. We'd need, to Mr. Romano's point, if we had bad weather, and they couldn't do it during the day, are we gonna have to pay them overtime? But there was a lot of equipment that would have been required, and then what do you do with those FTEs, like, the other months of the year? So I think we just decided against it. It was something that we brought to one of the budget workshops. It was a question that came up, and we had a whole proposal of how much the equipment costs and everything, so.
And unless it's an emergency need, we do not have them mow during the day. It's very disruptive to the students in the school. So again, you're gonna hire somebody on a second shift, and, you can't just put 2 people either. You really would probably have to put a minimum of 3, because think about the high school. If you have 1 person on a mower, you have 1 person that's weed whacking. It's gonna take you 2 full days to get that done, and now you have 3 days to get 8 elementary schools and 2 middle schools done. It's just not, it doesn't make sense.
Mr. Wachewski?
I guess as part of the budget, but also, I guess a situation where we could use it to sort of build out a lot of the things that we're already doing as far as the education part of what we're doing. I know about 2 years ago, I think Toro and Exmark actually launched a GPS monitored system. So it's a manless device, 60-inch mower, and basically set it, and you GPS mark the field that you want mowed or whatever. It goes out and it does it. It's a robot essentially. Could we potentially look into making investments in machinery like that we could dovetail into, again, we have I-195 that this is what they do. Like, they build robots, they program things and things like that. This could be a really good opportunity between VOAG, some of our students that are interested in technology. Again, the equipment's expensive, but, realistically, could this be a good, number 1, learning opportunity for our students, but number 2, trying to, I guess, get creative.
Sure.
And don't get me wrong, having been on the finance committee, what we pay our contractors for mowing, guys, we pay them probably 1/3 of what they could actually make. So I don't understand why they bid us. I'll go on the record saying that, but again, I don't see that there's necessarily cost savings with what we're currently doing. That's why we have to get creative.
Sure. So the thought about the robot mowing is phenomenal. It will happen someday. I've been to a couple of demonstrations. We actually, the contractor who mows our high school right now has asked me if at his cost, would we entertain if he wanted to do that. So he's working on trying to see how he's gonna make that work for us. And I'd rather let them be the guinea pig, figure it out, and eventually I do see us going that way when it gets to be to the point that there's enough of it out there that the demand, that we can afford those mowers. So it is coming.
Yeah.
Thank you.
They can mow in the middle of the night.
Exactly.
We can't.
Yeah, right.
Thank you, Mr. Romano. Just as long as we figure out how long it would take the next best crook to hijack that machine and move it to wherever they want to get it mowed to, would be our next.
Well, GPS monitored.
Yeah. Well, they're still in cars right now, so a mower is going to be pretty easy. Yeah, I could see that. And just as another aside, and I think, Ms. Camuso, this we touched upon a little bit, but the kids are outside on the fields at recess and PE class. So that's one of the reasons why it's hard to mow during the school day when we're utilizing the field space. So that's where I think the shift differential piece kind of starts to play a little bit of a challenge in that regard. But good question.
Stick with number 8.
Yeah, I think
Okay,
yeah,
sorry.
we'll go to 8 for a second because 9 is a little bit redundant. I'll give 8 to you. It's
Sure. Number 8 requested, can we get more detail regarding the extended school year salaries? Reference account 83-125. What is the staffing breakdown? So we had done this as part of our budget request. Excuse me. ESY runs in the summer for 4 weeks, for 4 days, for 4 hours a day. So if you add that up, that's 64 hours. And then we give, there's a 1 day of 4 hours for them to set up for the summer. So there's 68 summer hours related to ESY. And then up here, we broke it out between the teachers. The teachers get 6 hours to work on the IEPs for the kids. Then there's tutors, ABAs, paras, OTPT, et cetera. You can see up there. We told you also the number of staff that was required to run the ESY program there, and we costed it out, so it comes out to about $404,000. And then we also wanted you to note that the ESY enrollment has continued to increase. We had 205 students in the 23-24 ESY, and then 242 in the 24-25 ESY. So since COVID, that time, those counts have just continued to increase, which is why you're seeing such a large increase in that line being requested this year.
And am I mistaken, or is some of that due to IEPs that are requiring more time?
It's all IEPs.
Oh, yeah.
This staffing is not credit recovery summer school at all. This is only the students with the IEPs.
Number 9, is it possible to have town employees take care of plowing, ground maintenance, and mowing? I think we touched upon that. Number 10, so we got a little while here, okay. Number 10, does the current town employee contracts allow for the option to explore a change in the health insurance provider? And there is language in every contract that says other carriers may be substituted provided the benefits are equivalent as provided through the current board self-insurance plan. I think that was explored a couple years back, and it ended up reverting back to what we currently have. But I think it is something that's, continually worth exploring, giving the drivers of health insurance right now and the costs.
So can I ask a question about that? So with the self-insurance committee being disbanded, where would that discussion take place?
Great question. And I guess it boils down to whether, we are still self-insured. And so right now, the governing body that's overseeing self-insurance is the Board of Finance. So I'm imagining that their presentation from insurance consultants or providers or whatnot that would contract that out would be bringing it to that group first.
So adding on to that, would we have any say in any of that? As far as you know, is there a process in place yet? for
Not
all
to my
this
knowledge.
happen? Okay.
So,
Mr. Whitehead?
Mr. Chair, so just to get this straight, so the health insurance is one of the biggest drivers, but we have no more committee. Got it. Doesn't make sense. But in any event, though, I think that the health insurance, and I noticed too, for the VOAG program too, so those numbers went up exponentially for the self-insurance. I mean, it's really, seems like it's almost egregious, and I'm not sure what's the reason for that, those big adjustments, because if that's going to continue on into the short term, we need a committee.
Yeah, I agree.
So I can't agree more. I was on the self-insurance committee for 12 years. I got off the last 2 years. And some of the comments that I heard was that there's a feeling that the self-insurance committee didn't add value. And I know the meetings are long, and there are a lot of numbers, and it's a lot of detail. But this is an area that I think, I don't think it's a group that should be focused just on the insurance side of things. We did look at this a couple years ago. Mrs. Clark and I were on the committee a couple years ago, and there was a lot of study and review of multiple different potential options. We came up with a change, and then a decision was made to not make that change. And we could talk about that at another time. But I do think this is something, and I'll take this as a discussion, and I'd like to actually reach out to some of the other boards and say, we need to look at this option again to figure out reinstating the self-insurance committee.
It might, and however the town wants to approach it, and this board wants to approach it, maybe starting at the committee of the chairs meeting, just to have that entry-level conversation of, so what now? And see what what the best approach may be.
Thank you.
And then I just have one comment to add to that. They did invite me to the Board of Finance meeting, and the same insurance consultant was part of that meeting as well. And in the old world, this is the first iteration of the self-insurance budget, and there was a comment made at that meeting that they would continue to look at the level of funding required with the consultant over the next few months, as they had done with the self-insurance committee.
But that's a good point, but I will say, when you looked at the self-insurance committee, there were members of the Board of Education, there were members of the Town Council, there were members of the Board of Finance. There was also a member of the public who, this was what he did, this was his career, and he added some non-political, whatever you want to call it, input, logical business input into the decision-making and the discussion. And those discussions that we had at those meetings they were good, and I think there was a lot of detail in it. That's why I think the self-insurance committee to be in charge of, how much is our insurance cost now, just for us?
18 million.
So $18 million for the Board of Education. That's a lot of money to not have any say or oversight in, so.
Agreed.
Mr. Bashevsky?
Kind of build off that, Mr. Chair. Can we retroactively look back at maybe the last 3 budget cycles? Because I know this has always sort of been the elephant in the room. I mean, if
We can get that for you for sure.
Okay, because I remember that there's always been like a 10 or 20, between 10 and 20% every year. It's like, oh, we overshot a little bit, you know, just kidding, you know, put another $250,000 in the good. We don't need as much as we originally thought that we did. So, again, to be honest, I'm not too concerned over the fact that the Board of Finance, because out of all of our boards, I find that the Board of Finance is the numbers guys. So as long as there's an open relationship with our business director, as well as our superintendent, you know, I would imagine that they're gonna hear what you guys have to say and, you know, kind of build off of that, so. But again, it would just be kind of nice to know what those numbers were, just so that maybe, again, I know we're talking about the budget tonight. I feel like a lot of these are more supportive of why we spend the money, which is important. But at the end of the day, like, we have to really look at this percentage and figure out, like, how are we gonna do a little bit better here?
Yeah. Mrs. Clark?
We can get that for you.
I don't have a problem with not having a self-insurance committee, personally. I was on that committee almost as long, I think longer than you were, Zaya. What I'm concerned with, yes, we have a great Board of Finance, we have a great Town Council, we have a great Board of Education, and that's terrific, because we have great people on it now. What I'm looking down the road is what you were talking about with the energy costs that we're still paying after 12 years. We had no say in that.
Yeah.
And yet, we're
Right.
still paying 800 and whatever it is.
Yep.
Every year, we're paying for that. And I foresee, unless we have an actual process and procedure in place, which we don't have right now, Mrs. Mellett didn't get a number until the end of December for what to use for the budget for us. That's this year. What's going to happen next year? What's going to happen the year after that? What input do we have as far as the carrier goes, which, oh, by the way, we're 74% of the equation for the town. So that's my concern. I'm not so concerned about if we have a committee or don't, because quite frankly, now I get more free time once a month. What I'm concerned is who's developing the process that this will get the numbers that we need when we need them. That's my biggest concern, and I don't see that yet. So, my 2 cents.
All right, thank you.
Question number 12 on the grid, are there any savings in making outright purchases of items we currently rent? And I think the response is pretty straightforward. The district currently leases copiers and mail machines. Those are essentially what we're renting at this point. Leasing this equipment provides the district the ability to budget the cost over a 5-year term, so it kind of spreads that out over time. The maintenance of those, because we don't own the machines, is built into the cost of the lease, so that's a cost avoidance for us if machines were to be breaking down and we had to pay for servants' calls. I think one shift we have made is from leasing vehicles. That's an area where we have, they're probably a less delicate machine than a copy machine, and so we've been purchasing those outright, and I know those members that have been on the board and the finance committee made that recommendation a couple years back. Correction to number 13, so noted, Mrs. Camuso. Number 14, Can we see a list of administrator positions in the district by school district and by school along with a per pupil ratio? So I think we touched upon that earlier on with the ratios, Mr. Oshana. The list is in terms of administrators by school. There's the district administration and then building level administration. And so the district level administration would be the superintendent, the assistant superintendent, director of pupil services. And I'm only speaking to certified staff.
Right.
Director of teaching and learning. We have 3 coordinators, the coordinator for digital learning, the coordinator of ELA and social studies, coordinator of science and math. We have 4 special education coordinators that service 2 elementary schools, a middle school, and the high school. Across the buildings, we have 7 assistant principals. We have 1 at the elementary, 2 at the middle schools, and 4 at the high school. We have an athletic director. We have a director of the Karen Smith Academy, and we have 11 building principals and a director of guidance. I can populate that in there for you. I actually had that, and it probably just when it refreshed, it didn't go. So, but I only knew it because I did it a little while ago, so it was in my head.
And they work for you, so.
Yeah, there's kind of important people. Transportation, I think we've discussed in terms of the buses and reductions. The gas prices, so we've touched upon that as well. There is a cap, but there's not a, it doesn't work both ways. So in terms of the price for fuel that we agreed to at the time the contract was entered into, there's protection in terms of if fuel costs, escalate, increase, but unfortunately, if they're cheaper, we don't get a reduced rate on that. Coming down the road and just putting it on the radar since we are in a workshop, we're going to have to pay very close attention to the legislation that's requiring us to have some electric buses by the year 2030.
January of 2030.
January of 2030. And so we are working, I'm working actively right now, and I know Mrs. Mellett is, and I bet you Mr. Romano is as well, to try and get that date looked at and maybe pushed out a little bit, because that's not, between infrastructure and cost, it's not something that any district right now is in a position to do, other than, I can tell you, Branford Public Schools did go with an entire electric fleet of buses, a company out of California. They're the first company in Connecticut. But they were very clear about it. It was at a significant upfront investment in initial cost. And a lot of what they were able to do was due to some federal and state funding they received to try and get that off the ground. It wasn't something that was footed entirely by the local taxpayers of Branford. Special education, the number of students that have been brought back to the district over the last 3 years and the average costs. And so, okay. All right.
Thank you. So we did a little bit of data digging to find these numbers for you. When you look at the savings, we had to couch it a little bit with what that means, because students who were returned to district during the school year, we may or may not have encumbered for that whole year knowing that particular student's plan. So we gave you kind of an approximate based on those students who returned. We can't calculate a summer return because we didn't budget for them. So in order to answer that question, I pulled up what we currently tuition students for based on the profile of students in our district programs. So when we think about our students who are in our different programs, so SLC is our students who primarily have an autism diagnosis, so they have a variety of needs. There's BCBA support, lots of ABA staffing. They often have lots of speech and language services. Our CLC students, that's our Comprehensive Learning Center students, they have more global needs, lots more physical therapy, occupational therapy. Our TLC students, that has a more therapeutic approach, so students that have more counseling needs. They have more externalizing behaviors or internalizing behaviors that affect their ability to access their school day. So by looking at comparable programs and students we tuition now, I thought that was a good way to kind of speak to, when we bring students back, what our cost avoidance is. Any questions on that one?
Can you go back one?
Sure.
Because this question kind of ties in with the next one, right? So maybe if you want to merge those two together.
Sure. In terms of the staffing?
Yeah, the one, can you explain the impact of to the students in the district by adding a social worker, a special ed teacher, and a TESOL teacher? What kind of impact is that going to have on stuff like this?
Absolutely.
Are we going to be able to bring more students back? Are we going to be able to have more savings from those?
It's always the goal, is to keep our students in town.
Of course.
So when we look at adding a special education teacher, we're always looking at being able to maximize our staff time with children. So we don't just look at the caseload, the amount of students they service, but the hours those students require, right? So a student in a district program has a significantly higher number of hours of service. So we were able to use the CT SEDS as our special education data system with the state that takes all of our IEPs and can aggregate the data for us. So we started to look at that when we were looking at what positions we wanted to request. So we actually started with 3 requests. So I know you see one. We started with wanting to look at our littlest humans in our district programs and reducing the class size to maximize their growth. We also looked at using that data, both Kelly School and DePaulo, and you can see the hours per teacher in a week that their current caseload assignment would get them. So that's current, not projected. But looking at those numbers compared to other small elementary schools and the other middle school, they're sitting higher. So wanting to maximize the time with students that staff has per student. So that's our justification for our positions. I can go on to social worker if you want.
So what, I mean, just curious, so if this position doesn't get filled, what ends up happening? What's the impact to our students?
So the hours per student per teacher
Yep.
is the number we try to work towards a sweet spot with, right?
Yep.
So a district program teacher's numbers look very different, but they have more staff kind of tied to those kiddos. But when you're looking at the special ed teacher as students who have time that they're pushing into their classroom, they're providing that structured literacy for decoding. They might be doing executive function skills. So the group might have 3. If their numbers were lower, maybe they could have 2, right? So the teachers are meeting this now. They're amazing. They're doing the work. But if we could add a teacher to these buildings, we're making those numbers smaller. Okay. So the other question I tried to answer was social work, and I did take a couple of social work questions together. There were 3. So we're asking for an additional social worker. One of the drivers of that request is that we currently have 4 half-time staff at one elementary school instead of whole people. So looking at maximizing similarly the data we have for service needs for students, we want to provide more full-time staff at that school, and then that would trickle back to other schools that have 0.5. Oh, that's not my slide. Here we go. So here's our social work staff currently. So you'll see Daranoski Elementary School has 1 full-time and 3 half-time. So we have 3 staff are half at Daranoski and half somewhere else. So you'll see the 0.5 sprinkled. Some of that is truly student need, so a 0.5 is appropriate for some of our smaller schools. And again, using the same data system information, this spring will be, or our goal would be to make sure that the assignment works for every school equitably. Does that make sense? Okay. So this is our current assignment for social work. So our goal would be to look at Daranoski more holistically and then give back some 1.0s for some of those schools. There's a question about deliverables for social workers. I had to try to keep it on a slide. The biggest piece is our social workers are there for all of the things you think about that a little kiddo and a big kiddo might need, right? So at our middle and high schools, they run the CARES programs, the kiddos who don't have clean clothes. They can't wash their clothes. The kiddos who might need a Thanksgiving meal. They're managing all of that. They also are connected to all of our community resources to support families. So they're not just supporting the student in front of them, but the family that goes with the student. They talk to each other all the time because someone has a 7th grader and someone has a 3rd grader, and they talk about those families and try to support them. On top of that, They're doing social skills training, what it means to be a friend. They're doing transition supports 5, 6, and 8, 9. They are the mandated providers for much of the social skills and coping strategies and all of those mental health pieces in students' IEPs. They work with our 504 students. At the elementary level, they are the case managers for our 504 students. They are part of crisis response in every building. They are participating in risk assessments, threat assessments. They do home visits, and point of pride is at least 7 of our social workers have clinical licensure with the state of Connecticut. So they have just that bigger body of skill. I think that's my last slide for that. Yeah, that's my next question. Any questions on it?
So, I'll go first, John, okay? The need for a social worker is obviously completely needed today. We cut one last year or the year before, and it
Yes.
was detrimental to those students. I would have to imagine that this is just needed. I mean, there's no way you could, no other way of looking at it, except that it is, it's really what these special students need. They are living in a world today that is creating all of these problems for them. And I'm sure it's an everyday occurrence at all the schools, right? So I don't know how we can even look to not have that, in
Yeah.
my opinion. That's my opinion. And I thank you for saying that, because I think it's just very important. And all the other special ed positions that you asked for, the teachers in special ed are so overwhelmed with numbers, and the problems that the children now have are twice what they were 2 years ago. And we really did a disservice when we cut some programs 2 years ago, especially. That was a total disservice to those children, in my opinion. But what special ed teachers are going through today, the numbers and the problems, which are multiplied by 5 or 10, I don't know, you can't overlook those things. Those are real problems in a world that is extremely troubled, and the children are suffering. And it's our responsibility to make sure we do everything we possibly can so those children don't suffer. And that goes for regular ed kids too. You
And
know what I mean? And
the social workers see all the
yeah, and
students.
it's just all over. And
Yeah.
I thank you for explaining what you did, but it's just a real thing that we have to continually to stress to the public, because they don't see, many of the public that is, don't see what we're saying about the needs of these children, and they are very, very serious needs. So thank you.
You're welcome.
Mr. Carson?
I'm
Thank
sorry, Sean, I didn't mean to go.
No, you're fine. You know, it's a discussion that we need to have, not only as a board and a district, but as a community. And so I was the one that asked this question, okay? And so I specifically asked a question in a way that it was asked to identify the deliverables to the district, okay? To your point, it's needed, right? These services are needed. I think the staff is valuable, and it impacts everyone within the community, within the district, within the schools. But at the end of the day, it's a line item in the Board of Education budget. And so when I look at this, I see things that are primarily community related. And so it immediately prompts the question to me, as our budget and the people, the budget that's paying for these positions, social work positions within our community, what specifically is the school district getting for funding those positions? And I'll tell you where I'm coming at, and I don't know whether you know the answer to this question or not, but a lot of these deliverables, to me, sit with the police department.
The what?
The police department. Does the police department have and fund social workers?
That I don't know the answer to.
Right? We talk about threat assessment, we talk about home visits, we talk about crisis response, we talk about all these things, right? Connection to community resources. And we sit here year after year after year, and we hear the requests, and we hear you, because we know that they're needed. But every year, since I've been on this board, there has been a request for a social worker. And here we are again, and guess what? We need another social worker.
We do. Well, and to speak to you, I don't know about the police department's staff, but I can tell you that when we're talking about a risk assessment or a threat assessment, we're talking about a child who has made a statement that we are investigating further. So the staff is taking that responsibility on, because a lot of that is considered transient, meaning they are in an emotional place, not a place of checking their house for anything. So we're responding emotionally to statements children have made. We're providing help to their families so they can be available to access their school day. So when we're talking about making sure that they have food in their homes, that comes through in those sessions, right? Like we're checking in on their well-being, their status, because a hungry kid is not a kid who's learning. A tired kid is not a kid who's learning. So being able to support the family through those pieces. I worked with a school team today about accessing the Prudence Crandall Center. Like that's a school support connection for that family.
If I could just add one comment to provide some context, because I have the pleasure of reading every threat assessment that comes in across the district. And our social workers are not only connecting the dots within the community, and I agree with you, it is a community issue. The challenge is that our kids' behaviors manifest themselves in school. And as they occur in school, we have an obligation to not only try to stabilize that particular child, but all of the other children impacted, because you have someone that is dysregulated. And that lies on the social worker. Every social worker, every psych, every counselor in the district has been trained within the FBI CSTAG threat assessment model, because there's such concern over the emotional dysregulation that we have with some of our little and our bigs. And when it occurs, it's the social workers that are tapped to help stabilize the situation. One of the biggest challenges, not that you have to flip back, but when you ask for the distribution of social workers across the district, and you have a 0.5 here and a 0.5 there, and you have folks that are traveling, is that we don't schedule kids in crisis. So when it happens, we're all going to ground zero to try to address that challenge. And I can tell you, it happens more than you think and more than anyone wants.
Mr. Brown?
That's it.
The one reason for this, Sean, is the numbers of students who are in crisis has exponentially increased. The suicide attempts, the substance abuse, the bullying, and it's not only high school, which used to have once in a while, it's across the board. I hear cases of violence against a teacher in elementary school. You never heard that when I was teaching. So it's not that they're trying to add something that's not. I would argue they probably need even more. This is a change in the students and their behavior brought upon by so many things that the anxious generation talks about these things. and to ask the community to do things they're not trained for. You can't call the police every time a student acts up in a classroom. Eventually, if it gets serious enough, you have to. But the staff, the school takes the students as they walk in the door. And right now, they're walking in the door with more mental health challenges and social emotional problems than they ever had before, honest. And they've already cut the number here from, 4 to 1. So.
Right. So, and I agree with everything that is being said. My baseline and the reason for my questioning is the funding. Okay? It's not about, do we have more instances? Do we have more challenges in society? You know, and we absolutely need the resources to help these kids, right? Help our students become regulated instances of crisis and threat and connect them with appropriate resources. But bottom line is, I'm questioning the funding, because one thing I can guarantee is a year from now, we are going to have the same conversation. Okay?
Yeah, we are.
And so I identified this 5 years ago, and it's going to continue conceivably for the next 5 years. And so we're not getting any funding from the state. I can promise you that. What are the legal requirements and the funding sources related to social workers in a community? We, within the school district, as the Board of Education, are taking on a community issue and problem, and we're paying for it. And we will continue to pay for it as a community. The taxpayers of this town will continue to pay for it this year and next year and the year after that. And so I just want to make that point, because we're having the discussion and we're being asked to add staff. When and if we approve that request for a social worker, that becomes part of our operating budget moving forward.
Correct.
It cannot be deleted, removed. State law requires what our budget was last year, our next year's budget has to be at least the same. So once it's approved and once it's baked in, it's there forever. There's no switching of responsibility to fund that position.
Well, let me just make sure I'm correct. The budget number doesn't go down. Where those funds get allocated to can change, right? So it's not necessarily if a position is put into the budget this year that it never goes away. It's the funding that doesn't go down, right? So, and I do think, and you're right, I think over time, this is an issue, and it's been an issue that's come, and it comes, and it keeps coming forward. Unfortunately, it keeps coming forward because of the issues we keep being faced with, and I think, as Mr. Brown said, the issues continue to get ratcheted up, and we have to be able to deal with them, because the sad truth of it all is if we don't deal with it, I think the consequences of not dealing with it are things that we don't want to think about. We don't want to have to even imagine the consequence. We've seen the consequences of not dealing with this across the country, across the world, and I don't think we want to see that happen here. Mr. Bashevsky, did you have your hand up? Mr. Whitehead?
I'll be quick.
Please.
Mr. Chair. So
End the conversation.
could just a bit of clarification as the difference between the line item for social worker as per se guidance counselor, right?
Sure.
So I remember in high school, I know there's many of them at the middle school, so where does that fit in? Is this an extension? Does it make sense to look at guidance staff as opposed to social worker staff, or is the guidance staff now doing something different?
We don't have school counseling at the elementary level. So there's a middle and high staffing. So this is specifically to look at the elementary school social work supports.
Understood. Thank you.
Mr. Bashevsky?
I just had I don't need the answer now, but I guess this is where it becomes hard to, at least me, like, when we're reviewing a budget, and as Steve so eloquently puts every year, that we're in the business of people, right? And it's hard to measure. I guess out of the incidents that these social workers respond to, again, like, it would be nice, I'm not asking for it now, but it would be nice to know, like, do we make a difference 50% of the time, 60% of the time? You know, hopefully it's higher than that. I want to point out, like, we put almost $1 million a year into social working. And to Mr. Carson's point, you know, again, like, we have these children for 6 hours. I would bet my bottom dollar that 90% of the problems that these kids have is because of an issue with parenting. We have these children for not even a third of the day. You know, kids don't learn hate at school. Kids don't learn bad language all the time at school. But again, like, a lot of the issues that we see, the way that they have reactions, I'll tell you what, like, it's up to the parent to say, no cell phone. You know, no access to technology to avoid the bullying that happens and things like that. So I guess it's more, I'd love to know more of, like, how is this, is there a way to maybe offload some of the additions to our budget and potentially working with other organizations, whether it's the police department or the town? You know, I know a lot of people in the town that, again, like, if somebody's homeless, our social workers are putting them in touch with the right people in our town, you know, again, connecting those dots. But, you know, at the end of the day too, like, we're in the business of teaching kids, right? You know, spending $100,000 on a social worker, how many programs does that then tie up for me to be able to offer students who want to be there to learn? And it's no dig on them, it's just, again, this is the reality. These are the dollars and cents that we're looking at. We spend $40 million on special education because it's needed, because it's the right thing to do, because we're keeping kids in our community. But ultimately too, like, there's a trade-off. We're not able to offer certain services to students that would benefit from other healthcare programs, would benefit from other technology programs. So, you know, again, like, I want to kind of bring it, you mentioned it's detrimental. I would assume that we're not under any investigations by the state because we're missing the ball. When you say detrimental, that means to me that there's a student suffering that we weren't able to, and again,
That happens, Joe.
well, again, like, I'm glad, I don't hear about it, and we are missing the ball, but again, those are strong terms, you know, to be trying to justify a position.
And I mean, if I may answer your question or your comment about the parents being responsible, many of these children have mental and physical disabilities, okay? That does not, it's nothing to do with the parents. They are affected by society, they are affected by the world, they are affected by their own personal inability to deal with things. That's what a special ed child has, Joe, okay? So to say that parents, you know, have to take the cell phone away and that's gonna help, that we don't need a social worker, I
didn't say that.
Well, no, you kind of inferred that parents should be watching all
Parents
of
need to
this.
be parents.
What?
Parents need to be parents. You know, they
Yes,
need
parents
help
need to be
too.
parents, but it's very hard for parents to be parents of a child with a special ed need. They're not trained, Joe.
So,
You're not trained, I'm not trained.
so I think this, did you want to say something, Mrs. Clark?
I just wanted to say, I think what I'm hearing from everyone, yeah, there is a need, we know that. Who's paying for it? That is the
We're
bottom
paying
line.
for it, yeah.
We should be paying for teachers, who should be paying for social workers? We need the staff in the schools. However, is it something that perhaps as a town, we could look at, should the town be picking up a portion of this? Because what are we saving the police department? You know, that's a different discussion. We all know, yes, there is a need, but who's paying for it? And should it always be coming out of the education budget?
So I think this is a good debate. I think this is a good discussion. And I think, there's a lot of good, strong, solid feelings about this. I think there's more debate to come on this. I think it's something that people realize it's a need that's out there. We need to do something to prevent incidences, issues, whatever. And I don't think, if I'm not mistaken, it's not just special education students we're talking about here. We're talking about all students. So social workers work across all students, all districts, across the district, excuse me. So when you've got an issue going on in a classroom, you've got a disruption in a classroom, somebody's got to be there to help with that. And if we don't do something like that, it's not just that one student that's got an issue, it's the other 12, 13, 14 students that have been evacuated from the room or other things that are going on. So it's a good discussion. I think we need to continue this discussion. But I think we've heard it's a need. We just have to figure out where it gets paid for. But it is a need within our district, our education system. So why don't we move on to the next question?
So relative to that same question, there were 3 parts to it. It was for the social worker and the special education teacher, and we did touch upon those 2, but I would like to bring up Mrs. Pettit and Mrs. Crouch now to speak to the TESOL position.
Thank you.
Good evening. Hi.
Good evening.
So you can see what we have here is our actual and projected enrollment from 2020 to 2030. So the multilingual learners in our community are our students who are either coming from homes where they are, they're coming from homes here in the United States speaking a language other than English, or they're coming from another country and entering in speaking a language other than English. So when they get into our school system, our goal is to not only educate them academically, but we have to simultaneously get them to attain English proficiency. So when we look at our numbers from 2020 compared to 2026, you can clearly see that our numbers have skyrocketed. So in around 2020, we were somewhere around 150 students. Around 2026, we are at
261.
261
And we've
students.
had 3 signups this week.
Yes, alone. Are they coming from another country?
Most of what we're getting right now seems to be people coming from Connecticut cities, moving into our town, buying houses. So that's just been of late. But it definitely seems like whereas the cities tend to be kind of leveling off right now, we seem to be getting kids transfers in from cities.
Exactly. Yes, so you can see we have a 70% enrollment growth within 5 years, and within those 5 years, we have only gained 1 teacher. So we can speak a little bit to our current staffing levels. So currently in the elementary, we have 2 certified TESOL teachers. These are teachers who are specifically trained in working with students who speak other languages. So we have 2 teachers in the elementary school, and they are overseeing all of our elementary schools. So among the both of them, they're overseeing about 3 schools.
How many
we have-
students?
How many students?
At the elementary level?
That they're over in those 3 schools? that you're-
153.
150?
Yes.
I'm pretty sure is the, yeah.
And then we have one certified teacher at the high school level, and she is only servicing high school because our high school numbers have skyrocketed, whereas in 2020, I think we were at 12. We are now at about 42, 45 in high school. And so that has the added layer of we need to get these kids to graduate and to earn their diplomas and get them ready for life outside of high school.
And where we are at the middle school right now is we have a growing population at the middle school level, and we have no certified teacher that goes into those schools. Last year, we redistributed our staff to make sure that we had TESOL, because really, the state, and we can get into this in a minute, but the state is moving toward, you really have to have TESOL trained people in those classrooms teaching these kids according to the Connecticut English language proficiency standards. And so they're trying to get the state, with the recent release of its framework for multilinguals, it's trying to get the state to cohesively come together and start educating these kids with trained, skilled people. So we went through last year and redistributed our staff so that our TESOL teachers, the very few that we have, could be seeing as many people in as many schools as physically possible. So we now have teachers we have 2 elementaries in 4 schools. So they get 50-50 in each school. At the middle school level, we have no one. And at the high school, we have 1 teacher that oversees 40, that is with 40 kids. So we couldn't split that up. So we have tutors that are, that we've trained, but that are not trained and skilled in TESOL education. So we have some issues that even with what we had, we did the best we could to stay in line with where the state's going and the new guidelines that it's putting out there right now. And we have really fallen short. We can't service all of our kids.
Mr. Whitehead?
Yeah, just a quick question. So when you say servicing the children, can you just describe what that means? Like, what does that look like? So you have a student and they're not proficient in English. So does this TESOL teacher come in and is that their student?
Yeah.
Or they're just popping into classes or helping them with tests? How does it, when you say servicing, what are they doing?
Yeah, that's a really good question.
Can I speak to that?
Yes, please.
So servicing a multilingual learner can happen in a variety of different ways. So let's take a child who's a level proficiency 1. Let's just say we have a newcomer that's come into the country, does not speak a word of English. That service is gonna look very different than a child who's maybe at a level 3 and is a little bit more independent within the classroom. So typically, what should be happening with a certified TESOL teacher, they are finding time sometimes to be in the classroom. This year, a lot of our elementary teachers are working directly with the benchmark program to collaborate with teachers and to collaborate with the program that's happening in the classroom so that children are learning the language simultaneously while learning how to read, right? And learning all of those literacy concepts. Our tutors do mostly push in and are really supporting that student with the work that they're doing in that moment. So they might not be planning actual lessons for that student, but they're kind of working collaboratively with the teacher, like what does this child need to be working on and what do they need help with at that moment?
Can you explain the in order to
Yes.
address that question, explain the 4 levels?
Sure.
That every student may.
Absolutely. So the level 1 is a level 1 proficiency means they are barely speaking any English. This is a level that students can stay at anywhere between 1 to almost 3 years, depending on where their level of English was when they came in. Level 2, they're kind of still teetering between, I have a playground language, I can engage in basic conversation with people, but when it comes to the academic language, which is what we call the KELP, right, they struggle with that in the classroom and understanding the language of a classroom, so they need a lot more support. Level 3 would be intermediate. This tends to be where a lot of our kids tend to stay, because what happens, because of the lack of staffing that we have, once these kids reach a level of independence, we have to back off of their service to supply service to the students who are at levels 1 or 2. And so many of our students will get into high school level or middle school level and still be at a level 3 because they're not getting targeted language instruction. And then level 4 and 5 is proficient. So every year these kids are assessed using the LOS links, and that kind of tells us, okay, where has their language progressed at that point?
Thank you.
Mr. Carson?
How many middle school students do we have that need TESOL services or servicing? And do any of those children currently see a TESOL teacher?
So we have about 38 at the middle school level. Right now, we have a .5 tutor at DePaulo, and we have a .5 tutor that full-time tutor, but she goes between the high school and Kennedy. So both of those tutors are not TESOL trained. They are
Okay.
they are on the para
Right.
contract, but they're tutors.
Right, so they.
Right.
Right, so there's
Right.
no
We have a-
TESOL certified
The
teacher.
TESOL teacher is overseeing the school from the high school.
Right.
So, yeah, so it's very hard to provide that intensive, targeted instruction. And I just add with a TESOL teacher, you should, in an ideal world, have that teacher can be co-teaching some of the time. They can be doing, we really have to start, spend more time with these kids doing that one-on-one targeted instruction or small group targeted instruction. We've kind of juggled between trying to be in the classroom as much as possible, but these kids definitely have to get that targeted one-on-one or two to three instruction on targeted skills. Because what we have is we have kids that are a level 3 in speaking and listening, and a level 3 overall, but they're a 2 or a 1 in reading or writing. So those are the 4 domains that we test from them. And so we struggle with trying to meet whatever those, we need that targeted time to work on those domains that they're still low, because that's what's keeping them an ML. If they can't get out of a level 2 in reading or writing, they're not gonna score a 4 across the board.
Okay, so if we were to approve a full FTE, is that full FTE going to middle school population?
That's what we would like to see. So currently, I just want to be clear that what our TESOL teachers do, they're doing that targeted language instruction. They're also overseeing all of the tutors and ensuring that they're providing the best linguistic instruction that we can train them to give. In addition to that, we have to attend all IEP meetings or PPT meetings for students, 504 meetings for students, all of the academic planning. We are also providing professional development to classroom teachers, because obviously the amount of time that they might be spending in that targeted instruction is not enough. We need to train teachers so that they also know how to teach these students. And so with that, we estimated about all 3 of our TESOL teachers are probably overseeing about 87 students per teacher. And that includes students with IEPs, 504s, and other academic needs on top of linguistic needs.
Okay. Thank you so much. And, Chair, just a comment. I know as a board, we're very cognizant of our student-to-teacher ratio. That blows my mind.
I think it blows a lot of minds right now, yeah. Mr. Bishevsky?
Just a quick question. Well, I know we keep saying that. They're all quick questions, I guess, until they're not. So I fully support the ask here. Again, this is a non-negotiable. This has to happen. I guess where my question comes in is, as a parent of students myself, do we ever give these students and their families, is there a way to recommend maybe outside services, even if they have to pay for it, for example? To be able to offer that avenue where if we can't necessarily get them past that 3, hey, listen, your student's doing great, I would highly recommend, this tutor or what have you. We do it for sports all the time. Do we have avenues in the community that we're able to make recommendations?
So I can speak to that. So we have such a diverse population of students in this district. So we do have some students that parents have them enrolled in, for example, a Polish-speaking school on the weekends, and then they do, our school Monday through Friday. We have a couple of Chinese-speaking students that do the same thing. We also have other students where that is not an option. I know I've recommended students to go and visit SCOW, which is the Spanish community of Wallingford, in Wallingford, which is a huge community that does a lot of outreach, but sometimes it's a transportation issue. So here within the town, we've looked for some other options. I definitely think that's an area we can look further into, but when it comes to the cost and what we should be supplying these students, because they are Southington students, it is our responsibility to ensure that these kids are getting an equitable opportunity to learn English and learn. And that is what our TESOL staff is doing, and they do an amazing job with what they have, which is a very small amount of people. But we are stretched thin because that line just keeps going up. It's not decreasing, it is increasing, and the need is increasing.
And I will say, there is not much out there right now in terms of tutoring support. So, and a lot of the families, like you said, the transportation becomes a deal breaker.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, it is 8:56. We're going to stop here. We've made it just about halfway through the grid of questions. I know there are some new questions that are being added that came up this evening to the grid. Our next meeting is scheduled for Thursday, 7 o'clock, starting here. I just want to say thank you to all of the administration that have gotten up and spoken and brought life into your requests and the things that you're looking for and the budget that's in front of us. And I want to say thank you to the board members for doing the work that they've done to come up with these questions, and then the dialogue tonight, which I think has been very good. It's been it's a spirited debate. A lot of good information came up, a lot of good questions came up, and so I want to just thank all you guys for all the work tonight too. So we'll see everybody on a Thursday evening, 7 o'clock here.
Okay, thank you.
5:30.
What did I say?
5:30.
Oh,
Thank you, everyone.
7 o'clock, no, 7 o'clock is the start of the workshop. We'll be here early, but the workshop starts at 7.
Yes.
You do pretty.
I can't.